Hello, my name's Peter Bellis. I will start in a minute as everybody's logged in. So I think most people are already logged in. I'm waiting maybe 20, 30 more seconds and then I will start. Good. So welcome to our small webinar about time to market in the data warehouse. What is the challenge? What do you need to solve? And how are we supporting with the Datavault Builder this whole process? I will first go into a description of what the challenges are, not especially in regards to the Datavault Builder, but what you need to solve, what the issues are, and what possible solutions are. In the second half, I will go more into the details of the Datavault Builder. You can ask questions at any point in time. You have a feature called raise hand in your Zoom that you can just use to raise your hands. I'm not seeing this screen all the time, but I will watch again and again if there are any questions, and you can type them as well in the Q&A section if there is anything that I can answer directly. Good. So who am I? My name is Peter Bellis. I'm working for 2150 for now 10 years. I started in data warehousing in the year 2000. I worked first in banking, created Inman, or was working on Inman data warehouses. I was working in the telecom industry on Kimball solutions. And back in 2012, I had the first time the challenge to create a near real-time warehouse. And as we had a lot of time pressure, we had a lot of changes in the source system because the source systems were not ready yet. We opted for a Data Vault solution. And it was at the end a really good solution decision, but the problem was that the tooling was missing. And we found out after 2 weeks, Data Vault not using a tooling is very, very difficult to manage because you create a lot of different objects in the database. You need to manage all the loads. So we created to start our own tooling. Now, years later, we created a product out of this, and now for years, we are selling the product, the Datavault Builder, through different partners worldwide to clients, which are using it to create up their data warehouse. I'm working specially right now in pre-sales. This means I'm doing sessions like this here. I'm supporting partners to get trained up. I'm supporting new clients to create their initial data models. So what do we know about time to market? Why I think we can speak about it? That's because the German business analyst group, the BARC, has decided that we won in the 2019 data management survey in the peer group data warehousing automation products in the category time to market. It's not the only thing. We won quite a lot of other badges like product satisfaction, data access, and recommendation. And interesting enough, price to value, even if we were competing against free products. But today I'm talking mainly about time to market and why it's our main focus of driving the product to develop it further. So what is the challenge in the data warehouse? We are getting new data sources. We need to connect to existing data sources and add new entities. We need to connect to existing entities and add new attributes, change attributes. That's the stuff we are thinking about. We need to extend our data model, create objects, and implement new stuff in our core model. But the issue is that's not everything. This is the main part of our work, yes, but that's what is in the focus and many other things are forgotten. So what do we need if we want to achieve agility? Usually, we're talking about working software. But here in the data warehouse, we need working data. And what does it mean to create working data? Data works if it's good enough to make decisions and to make better decisions than without the data. We are not seeking for like the perfect approach. We are not trying to create in the first iteration the best data that was ever made. We're just trying to deliver more information to our business users and give them some value immediately. And that's about agility in the data warehouse. So we need to make the data available to the users. We can only judge if the data is working if the business users having access to this data can use it and make decisions. And as mentioned before, it's not perfect, it's good enough. And it sounds a little bit bad if you say we deliver good enough data, but sometimes it is already enough to steer your sales channel if your data is 99% accurate, because even in the last percent, it will not change your figures too much. You can still improve later on to work down the last cases. But if you don't know about 99% of your data, you have serious issues of driving your business because you have data, no data at all. And that's what's about agility in the data warehouse. So which kind of layers do we need to cover? So let's have a look on a classical design, and that's how we implement it. If we have the data vault process that we're automating, we have the source systems where the data is coming from. We're loading it in the staging area. And funny enough, that's most probably the layer that nearly everybody agrees, disregarding if you're implementing an Inman style warehouse, if you're doing Kimball style warehousing. But first you try to decouple your source system, you load it in your target database. And now there are two different ways. It's loading it into the core. It's the raw vault load if you have already clean business keys, or to load it into a persistent staging area if you need to historize based on technical keys. And that's quite often the case because the data is usually not that good as we would like it. And this is one of the fundamental changes here if we compare this to an Inman architecture. And this is one of the key parts giving us agility. We have no business rules between the staging and the data vault section. So it means we can't do anything wrong. We are not needing to wait until the business user defines these business rules. We can just load the data. We just need to know the keys. And the point is we need to know the keys, otherwise we can't load it. It's not like snapshotting your data every day and hoping that you find out what it means later. You need to understand the grain of your data and the business keys. But as soon as it's persisted here in the data vault, it's going in the direction of the dimensional model. That's just how we call it. It's the interface layer. We need to bring these thousands of objects that we have sometimes in bigger data vaults into a simpler view. And here we are going more the point of view of Kimball. We are not using the same load mechanisms to create the result, but the form that he described how the data needs to look like is still the same, because most tools are optimized for it, and we need to account for it that some users will use like Power BI, Tableau, Click, Sub Business Object, Cognos, and we still need to present them data in a way that all these tools understand it. And the dimension model is very, very simple, as you can't join stuff together which is not working out. And now we see here the business rules that we were missing here in Inman world that would exist here are applied only after the data was persisted. And this helps us to solve a lot of problems, as it means that we can change the data virtually, just in views, try out what works, and only after we are created a final version of our business rules and the business user signed off, we can, if we need to, persist it back in the business vault. But we can do a lot of iterations staying virtual. And if we are on the right databases, like on Snowflake or Exasol, we can keep these rules sometimes virtual forever for many outputs. And from there, we are going into data marts, and that's as well the difference to Inman, because Inman would have written already the bad data out here. As we persisted the bad data as well, we can output it to the error marks. But the good thing is, we can decide if we want to include the bad data as well in the data marts, because sometimes the bad data is the best data we have. So if you have like orders without the customers, still better to have the revenue figures in the data mart and report that you need to get the customer information for that than to just throw it out as we did it in the past. So this is the layer architecture which helps us to become agile by putting the business rules from here to here, and by decoupling all the different loads into separate tables means that the management of these tables becomes much simpler. We are adding only new stuff, makes it much, much simpler to extend your model gradually. Good. And with the Datavault Builder, we're covering all of this process and automating that. But that's as well not the full picture. So what's the enemy of working data? It's the waterfall project management. So you try to design everything up front, you try then to implement everything, then you try to test everything, and then you find out it's not working and you go back to the start. So let's put it a little bit different than just to complaining that the waterfall approach will not work. What does the people hinder to use an agile approach? And the main thing is when we talk to business users, they say if the change costs are high, I rather wait a little bit longer and get everything that I request than to getting something now, but not with the ability to change it later. So, and the second thing is, if changes are a risk for me that my existing reports stop working, I rather prefer to have a few iterations, delivering bigger blocks of code or reports, and then get the final result and wait longer. So we need to tackle these 2 points, the change costs and the risks. And that's what I will talk in the next few slides. So how we mitigate this? We invert it, minimize the risk, minimize the cost. Very simple, but how? So how we can approach that is by standardization. This means by having a well-tested process of doing stuff, we will know that it will work out later. Second thing is automation. Because we have standardization, we can automate it. We just need the inputs. What is the target? What we want to reach? And from that, we can generate the technical implementation. And the third thing is reduce the number of tools involved in creating your solution. Because the more tools you have, the more difficult it will be to maintain the interfaces, to maintain the release cycles, to maintain the deployments. So many people tell us, yeah, but standardization, it's limiting my options. And yes, it is. Imagine like this power plugs. In Germany, we have this kind of power plugs. In Switzerland, we have this kind of power plugs. And both of the standards work pretty well, but you need to stay within your standard in your country. But as long as you stay in your country, you don't care about the other power plugs. It's just fine. It's solving your problem. And if you have a standardization which is solving your problem, you don't need to care that there are 1,000 other options that you could do, which are not bad as we see because both of the solutions work. But still, you need to have something solving everything that you have as business requirements and giving you the required output in a very, very simple way. So what do we do in that case? So we focus on well-described modeling forms such as Datavault or anchor modeling. In our case, it's Datavault, but there are other modeling forms like we have with the power plug that work as well, have different focuses, but there are other modeling forms that are not working for everything in that well as we like to, like their normal form modeling makes deployments much difficult, makes change costs much more expensive. So that's why we're focusing on certain modeling forms. Now, as well, what we can do is there were people more clever than us describing how IT services management works. There are 7 books of Agile, and there is described usually how you set up your different environments, what you need to do for proper development cycle, and that's what you can follow and you can teach to everybody. You can get certified because everybody knows what you're talking about. As well, in the deployment phase itself and development phase itself, there's a process called Git flow, which describes how you version your stuff, how you create releases, how you can branches, how you merge code together from different developers, which was tested very well in the Java world for years now. And they came up with a solution that is well tested, well described, providing really simple tools for it. And yet still, even if it's complicated because the task that you're doing is complicated, this is probably the most simple way to solve this issue of deployment versioning. So we're taking all the possible implementation versions that are out in the world and reducing them to a set of well-defined standards, and that's how we go on. The second thing is, after we decided what we want to model, we automate it. And it means that we have a model-driven development. It means that the business users are entering just business terms, what they want to reach, they connect it with business keys, and everything else is then generated on a technical level automatically. So the model can be developed together by the business user and the IT. And this is bringing us a lot of information as well from the business users into the data warehousing world. It makes the solution better accepted. And that's possible because we're talking about on a very abstract layer, not on a technical layer, when we're creating a solution. And what we do here as well, that we are optimizing the data model for small changes. This means we are putting apart the different entities into smaller boxes, and we try then to add small pieces again and again. And one important thing is, in our approach, is that we are not doing that one way. Because when we are adding here some business definitions to generate the technical stuff, is very simple, but we learned that as well, if somebody's changing the technical implementation, we need to adapt the business model as well. Why? Because it happens. Over time, there will be again and again situations where like somebody on a weekend needs to do a change on your production database. And if this is not automatically translated back into your data model doesn't match technical implementation anymore, and the people will lose trust in your model. Next step is not only the modeling needs to be automated, but the whole setup of new environments. Because if I want to work by ITIL rules, I need to have sandboxes for different developers. They need to do the changes isolated, test them isolated, and check them into Git and bring it through the Git flow process together. And this I can do only if the whole setup of new environments is automated. There we use, for example, technologies like Docker, like Jenkins to schedule as well new environments, to load integrated models automatically, to run tests automatically, and then evaluate if the regression was successful and if we can go on with a validated new model. And what is now new, with a small spelling error, systems that we are building right now needs to bear in mind that at some point later, they will most probably, if they are not already being created in the cloud, they will be later migrated into the cloud. So if you have an architecture which is not ready for a cloud deployment, probably you're creating right now a wrong solution. Good. What we do in development and the release process, we orientate ourselves on agile development processes like Scrum, but it could be as well Kanban and different other stuff. But it's really great if you're in this agile world and you're using standard processes, that there are as well tools for project management, like the whole Atlassian software thingies that help you to organize your development. And from that, you can automatically create Git branches, which is working together with our tool. And that's how all the bits come together. So now we have already so many different aspects that we need to bring together: automating the model, automating the infrastructure, automating here the development and release process, and versioning the stuff. And yes, it gets complicated. And that's where I want to stop. It's just, there are different ways to bring this together, but if you try to do this manually and create your solution from ground up, you need to consider all of that. And that's where it's failing, because most people stop here. That's what most automation tool covers, but that's not enough. So let's see what this is here about. That's weird. Okay. I don't know what happened here to the PowerPoint slides. Okay, not get confused. So I'm trying to read it. So the development of models, what it must cover. The model must allow changes at low cost. It must be versioned, and this needs to be done mainly automatically. It must be self-documenting. And the conceptual and the logical model must be easy to read so that you can use it for communication with your business users and for marketing of your project, honestly, that you can really sell what you're doing as well to your data recipients. And what we came up with is that we use for modeling in our tool Datavault. And we are here working with the worldwide Datavault community to see which kind of changes were adapted by different data modelers around the world and try to implement the newest best practices into the tool. But this doesn't mean that we're just looking to one person defining what should be done, but try to talk to everybody and implement the best solutions in there. The second thing is, usually we recommend to use Scrum, but as I said, it could be another Agile approach. The only thing that we don't recommend to use if you want to improve your time to market is a waterfall approach, where you just try to go layer by layer, implement everything and go to the next thing. Third thing we strongly support is an ITIL approach and say, okay, if you really want to work properly, if you want to reduce your risk, and that's not about time, it's really this ITIL conform development costs time, because you have different environments, you have different testing steps, you have different gates where you sign off stuff and your users need to agree that this is what they need to develop. Still, this is the part about reducing risk, because being fast is not enough if you're not in a reliable way fast. And the last thing we're following is the Git flow process. So we allow you to export your models in a fashion that you can check your data model into Git. So everything, including the flows, including the table structures, including the metadata definitions, can be exported in a way that it can be checked into Git. Means that it can be versioned by Git, it can be branched and merged by Git. This means that you can set up different developers, bringing their code together that was developed independently. And why is that important? The point is, if you work Agile, it can be that I, as a developer, develop a feature, but my business user is on holidays and is never signed off for the next 3 weeks. But my colleague maybe starts a week later developing another feature, and his business user needs that change urgently, so he signs off, tests immediately, signs off immediately, and you can deploy it right away. In the case, like in the past, if you had like fixed releases, you would need to wait until my features finished, signed off, tested, and then we could put both into testing, both in production, and go on. That's not the case anymore. If we use like the Git flow process, Git is managing that my change is different from my colleague's change, and we can choose which one to deploy first, even if it was developed later. So that was very abstract. It's just, I try to show you a little bit that there are really a different aspects to get to time to market, and you need to be good at all of them to manage it. And now let's go a little bit more into the details, how it looks like, and now it will be maybe more clear what I mean. So here, this slide I have taken from a project done back in 2006 before we created the Datavault Builder. So how did we work in a big data warehousing environment? We had our data models created, discussed, then we generated, in the best case, ETL flows and database structures out of it. We used some ETL patterns from like Informatica in that case to create some STD type 2 loads. And that's a real picture here. It will look like this. Then what we did is we did some orchestration and scheduling, maybe in Control M, in some companies with UC4 to parallelize as well everything. We wrote some documentation about the ETL flows. We wrote some documentation about the database clients. And then we went into deployment. Here we used like some Redgate tools to create our deployment script and to version stuff. And when we deployed that on our test environment, we did the data profiling with real data. And usually found out that we need to go back to the drawing board because the data didn't match the description from the business users. Not because they were mean or something, but because they didn't know either, because it was implemented differently in the systems than what they believed in the business process. And these round trips took days. In one company, even weeks that I have seen, but let's assume that it takes days. And at the end, you could generate like the data lineage. So you covered everything, but there are a lot of different tools involved and a lot of different interfaces. And even if the initial setup during the project phase was working, because we could like set up one tool after the other, test everything, it was a nightmare in maintenance. Because over time you needed like to update the ETL version, the tool version of ETL tool version, or the database, or the deployment tool. And as soon as you did that, you needed to recheck all the interfaces, test everything, it was working again. And it was really, really expensive and slowed down the project more and more. And that's why we came up with the solution saying, hey, we need one tool doing all of this that we had here in these tools. And by putting that everything into one tool, it will speed up our development process, makes it much simpler, and reduce our time to market. So model-driven data warehouse automation is the approach we're taking. Is it one tool? Not really. It's one tool plus the database. Why? Because we decided that managing the data itself, giving data access, querying the data, that's so done in a very good way by the databases that we can't do it better. So right now, Datavault Builder installation is one part, the tool itself. The other part is a database that you need where you store all your data and where the data is moved. The good thing is we're using an ELT approach. This means if you need more power in moving around more data, just increase your database size, you get more power and you can process more data. What does it mean? We tested it up with loads with like 6 billion rows per load coming in, and that can be processed within a few minutes if you size your database right, which means you get a really expensive database. But still you have the option, but for most clients, they're working like on a normal SQL server. So bigger installations may be used like an Exasol database or Snowflake, and you have all the choices that you need, but we're supporting only certain kind of databases because we're optimizing all this tooling for the database. Good. So how does it look like? Because now I've explained you that we need to cover a lot of steps in here and that there are different processes. We need to reduce risk. We need to reduce time, bear the cost in mind. How does it look like now if I use the tool? And that's the important thing. We reduced everything that we see here to a very simple approach. So let me reshare my screen. Just takes me a minute to log in. Okay, I'm ready. I'm sharing my screen. As soon as Zoom likes to do it. Okay, good. So what did I do? Before we started this session, I did start up a new Datavault Builder instance. by automating this process, it took me just 2 lines of code, just shut down the environment that was there before, remove everything, and the new line started up, and it created automatically the whole setup, the whole tool was started, a database was started, all the structures were installed, the tool connected with the database. The whole setup took 2 to 3 minutes, but what I was needed to do is just to run a script, and that was everything. Now, what do we see in the tool? We see the layers that I've discussed before in the slides, that we have the staging layer, we have the data vault area where we persist our data, we have a dimensional model where we create the interfaces to our core model, we have the business rules section where we can load the different business rules, and we have the data lineage, which is right now empty. That is a complete new environment set up in just a few minutes. So I will start here with the deployment section, and I will connect here to environment, and I can include here already an existing data model. Just need to here for connecting to my drive. Okay. I can reshare my screen. I selected the file from my hard drive, and it's now comparing the contents of the data model that was already created in the tool with my new environment. And because my environment is completely new, it needs to create everything, so I can select everything here. And here we see the first time how the deployment works. I can really select on the logical level what I need to deploy to a certain environment. It's creating the deployment script, or can even execute them right away, so you have all the options. So you don't need to take care, move to another other tool, or move around some scripts or write some scripts. And that is saving you already a lot of time and costs. The point is, you realize this only after you started your project. So it's really important that if you're taking such approach to your company, or if you're a consultant and taking it to a client, that you really explain what the value is, that it will solve you a lot more problems than just the data modeling bit that we have seen here in the beginning, because that's what most people are thinking about. So what did I import right now? It was a business model created in the Datavault Builder itself. We talked like to a company in the ground handling of flights, and they told us how their business worked. And while they were telling us, we modeled it in here in the tool, and step by step, we created our logical data model. And what you see here are the big blue boxes are core business concepts. They will translate in the data vault world into hubs. We have relations between them, which will translate into links. And we have something where we will store the satellite, the attributes, which are the so-called satellites. But here on this level, if you're talking to business users, we are not talking about data vault. Here we are talking about a simple data model about relations between business concepts. Good. So here you have as well different ways of bookmarking this stuff and working with your data model. After you have done that, you collected all the information from your business users, then you can go and connect it to the data. So I would go here in the staging layer. In my file that I imported were 2 source system connections. I can add here a simply new table, and now we go in the technical data-driven modeling and connect the data-driven world to the model-driven world. And the good thing is, because everything is connected, the model and the implementation, right away, the data is started being loaded because the tables were created and everything. So everything goes hand in hand in the tool itself. We could go to the data viewer, check the data, but I want to go because I don't want to make it long in this call. It's more for a detailed section. Just add now the data that I just staged here into the core. So I select the table, and now the last thing that we do is we are asking the business user about giving us the business key for a flight in the real world, which will be something like the flight number, the date, And the good thing is I can check right away here if this business key that I have selected, and that's what Datavault is about, if this key is unique, if we can identify object in the real world by using this key. So I click on the business key checker and it's giving me instant feedback. It's not just telling me that it's not unique. It's giving me here examples. It gives me the number of duplicates and it gives me some sample data so I can review it, and I see that everything is coming from Southwestern Airlines, so I can contact Southwestern Airlines if necessary, and we'll find out that this is the difference between these flights. So I need to add this column. And this is about these feedback cycles that I was talking earlier. So if you modeling beside the database in a modeling tool and you generate the stuff later on the database, you will have not this feedback cycle. So you will model it the wrong way, you will then generate it later, find out a day or two later that it was wrongly implemented. You need to go back and start the whole process again. Here, because we're working directly with the database, you get instant feedback. And now if you worked with Datavault before, you will see that we have created a hub, we imported the hub, we have created the hub load, a satellite was created and satellite load was ready, the business key, and that's the nice thing because everything is integrated. The business key and hash key columns were added to the staging tables, the ETL jobs were changed, and these are the things that cost time if you need to do it manually or sync them with some processes. And here everything is corresponding to each other and bringing everything together. So what we don't see here as well, a lot of technical artifacts were created on the database, like to track if somebody's deleting data in your source system and it's not telling you. And the nice thing about this is we've seen this in projects before, so we implemented the solution and you don't need to think about it until to the point where you have this problem, because it's already solved by standardization. As well, you don't need to think about which columns to add here into Hub because that's done by standardization. So right now we created really a production-ready data warehouse load from scratch. We did set up a complete new data warehouse, new database, loaded a model, added production-ready staging and core loads, and everything is up to be run. And it's operational. So you can go to the job section, you can start the job and it will run everything that we have designed so far in the right order. Why? Because it's metadata driven, so we can generate all this operation stuff out of it. So the last thing is, assuming we're a business user and we are working agile, do we have working data? No, we have loaded it into the core, but nobody has access. So I'm really breaking here my promise in the beginning that it's about providing working data. So let's go to the dimensional model. Let's create a new interface. Choose the grain, and here we are going into the Kimball's peak because we're going into dimensional modeling. I select what my output should be, and visually I can select now which columns I want to output. And again, here we can involve the business users because adding a column and stuff like that, they will understand. They will a lot of stuff probably not understand in the SQL area, in the database, but adding here like new columns and stuff like that should be no problem. And here we see visually the big blue box is our flight that we created. We have the satellite with all the columns that we loaded. Plus we have a lot of gray boxes because they were modeled but not implemented yet. So we can add here just some more columns. Store it. And here in the first version, these interfaces are virtual. So I don't need to reload the data. I just need to save it. It will save a view in the database. I can have a look at the output and I see directly how it looks like. If I don't like it, I could change it. I will do that a little bit later. So let's go to the business rules section. The last thing that we need to do is to publish now this interface. And right now we reach the target of having working data. Now we can call our business user and say, we created everything in our first environment. Can you have a first look? He will start up his reporting tool. I'm using here ClickView because I'm know how to use ClickView, but it could be Power BI, it could be any tool that you're using, and automatically load your stuff in your reporting tool. And that works because we are publishing the metadata of the data warehouse on our interfaces, so you can automate as well your report generation. And this is here now the last step. So our first story is finished. We loaded really the data through the whole data warehouse in a complete new environment. We're ready to deploy it, so everything is covered. I could check it now one-to-one by just using one button click into our Git repository, and everything is covered, even the parts of the process that you didn't thought about. But now, what is about change cost? Imagine now the business user calls me back and say, hey, this column names are ugly. Could you change that? No problem. Again, the layers are corresponding. I can just go in here, add your flight number, rename that, save. I don't need to reload the data. I just call my business user. Hey, you can reload the data. So he starts the reload. Done. Next change he requests maybe to add here a column that he can sum. That's fine. That's in the business rules section. Let's add it here. Change costs become very, very simple, low by the design of the tool. So let's store it here and publish this. Again, I don't need to join this different business rules. That is done by the tool automatically. And right now I can create like my first report. And we really get here some information that Atlanta, what I have here, is the biggest airport. And this works as well with refactoring. If we do changes to the core, or if we want to change the output and keep the interface stable, everything built in. So we can, instead of the origin output, like the origin city name, refactor it. And this is about lowering the change cost. Yes, you can do that manually, but again, it will take you a lot of time. You will need to write the change script. You need to take care about deployment. And this is everything solved by metadata-driven approach. And this is probably the place where I want to end for today. As we see that the output is working here, and the biggest output is Atlanta, which works. So I would be now open for questions and whatever you like to know. Good. One classical question about licensing. You're licensing the tool by server, by production server. So you buy one license for the production server and you can install as many test and development servers as you want, because we believe in this Agile process. We believe that you should use sandboxes. So you pay for the production server plus the number of developers. So as well, read-only users are included in the server price, operations users are included in the server price. And how expensive it is depends on how big the database is and which database technology you're using. We're supporting here Exasol, Snowflake, Oracle, SQL Server, and Postgre. And depending on that, we can do prepare your offer for your situation. Okay. Another question is, do we support subversion for versioning? No. The point is, you could still, the format that we provide, you could use in theory to check into subversion, but you wouldn't get the full functionality. And that's not based on the Datavault Builder, but on how subversion and Git works. Subversion is a central repository, which just where you directly work on the central repository, and Git is giving you the possibility that you have a central repository and a local one. And based on that, because you have a local repository, all the changes you do are tracked against your baseline. So Git knows exactly what you added. And that makes it possible that people work in parallel. They create a data model in parallel and can join the differently developed parts later together, even if the order is not right, how the changes are coming in. So please use Git with the Datavault Builder, but in general for any software development. Good. Can it be run on other databases than the 5 supported? No. And that's about standardization, because we are, and that's maybe a very important point. We are not just giving you like a tool creating patterns where you can like put in your patterns as you like, as other tools do it. Because then the issue is you have to create your own patterns and you need to know everything that we learned about data vault and data warehousing in the past 8 years, and you need to maintain it yourself. What does it mean? Why don't I generate always the same patterns? It's because the databases change. Example, Exasol version 6 was now replaced by Exasol version 7, having new data types specially built for data vault warehouses. And to use them, you need to change your data types, you need to change your load process and stuff like that. And we are maintaining this for our existing clients. So if you're using the Datavault Builder, you just upgrade to the newest version. We will upgrade your technical model to the newest version so that it works well with the newest database version. And that's a lot of effort we're putting in to get all the feedback from our clients, improving our patterns constantly and maintaining them over time, including update scripts. So it's the 5. It will not stay maybe forever for 5 databases, but it will be always a limited number of databases as we need a broad customer base per database so that we get a big enough feedback group and can improve it. Can I share the recording? I will ask the product manager, probably yes, because we have nothing confidential in here, I think. Good. Are there any more questions? In the case you're interested in specific details and you want to maybe talk about what your challenges are, how you want to how we could support you solving them, you can talk to our product manager, Tobias Steil, who will contact you after the webinar to ask if there are any open questions, if you want to have a one-to-one session to answer certain topics. So if there are no more questions, I wouldn't extend it too much. I thank you all for the attendance and looking forward to speaking to you maybe in some other more detailed sessions about your specific challenges that you have. Thank you. Bye.